Incoming is another super week, which means a new episode every single day for a whole week. This will be exclusive to super listeners on Patreon and on Apple Podcast subscription. The next 100 people who sign up to either Apple Podcast subscription or Patreon will get a completely free 7-day trial.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/kidsandfamily. Just go to Indeed.com/kidsandfamily right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Did you know 1 in 2 women wear the wrong foundation? Matching foundation is hard, but Il Makiage makes it easy. Take the Power Match quiz to find a perfect match in seconds, customized to your unique skin tone, undertone, and coverage needs. With 600,000 5-star reviews, Woke Up Like This is our best-selling foundation for a reason. Available in 50 shades of weightless natural coverage. And with Try Before You Buy, you can try your full size at home for 14 days. Just pay shipping. Take the quiz at ilmakiage.com/quiz. That's ILMAKIAGE.com/quiz.
Kids vs Adults Series 3 applications are now open, all the way until the 5th of March 2025. If you want to apply, ask an adult to fill in the contact form on the website with the subject Kids vs Adults. Make sure that they put the names and ages of those who want to play, whereabouts in the world you are, and which team you support. So far, we've had applicants from India, Brazil, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, America, the UK and beyond. No matter where you are in the world, I want to hear from you if you want to be on Series 3. So, do you think you could beat one of your adults in a football quiz? If you do, what are you waiting for? To the Football for Kids podcast with me, Darren Rees. In this episode, we're going to be talking about a very special football stadium, which isn't only rich in history, but at the end of the 2024-25 season will no longer be in use. In this episode, of course, we're going to be talking about Everton's stomping ground, Everton's magical home, which is known as the venue of Goodison Park. First of all, before we get into this episode, an enormous thank you to every single one of you who listened to the podcast on Audible, who have hit that follow button, and for those of you who have taken the time to leave a 5-star review. You, the Football for Kids listeners on Audible, have made Football for Kids one of the top 10 sports podcasts in the world on Audible. So, if you've done that, thank you. And if you haven't, then please do get on and do it. It will help me out loads. Right then, we've got quite a long one to get into with this one, and a very special one indeed. So let's get straight into it, shall we? But before we get into it, let's talk a little bit about football stadiums in general, because to say they have changed over the years would be a little bit of an understatement. I don't know what stadiums you may have been lucky to go to, or if you've not been to any at all. I've been lucky enough to go to quite a few in the world. Tottenham Hotspur's stadium, which is a stadium I have been to, is one of the most remarkable places I've ever been to when it comes to sport. The view from the seats, the food and the drink areas are like huge shopping malls in America, and the technology is out of this world. There's lots of other good stadiums which don't match that one. Wembley Stadium is one which is pretty special though, although it doesn't touch Tottenham Hotspur's. that really is a very special place. But here's the thing, football stadiums never used to be like that. And Goodison Park, Everton Stadium, is a great example of this. An old school ground where the history and the old fashioned nature of the buildings, the stands and the surroundings aren't only a nod to the past, but they are the past in our present future. So, if you've listened to the episode which I made on Anfield, you'll know that Everton were actually the residents of that stadium before Liverpool Football Club had even been formed. And in that episode on Anfield, you can hear so much more about how Everton ended up leaving Anfield and went their separate ways after a bit of a disagreement. But as the story goes, there was a boring old meeting which adults attended, and within those adults included the first ever recognised Everton manager, William Barkley, and some others involved at the club. One of those was a man called George Mayon, who was and is a huge part of Everton's history as a football club. The big thing which everyone was talking about was where Everton would build their own home ground, as they were already a fairly established club and they didn't have anywhere to call home. George Mayon said that he thought that a club should relocate to somewhere else, and someone in the room shouted, "Ah, you haven't got anywhere to go." Which George Mayon then responded, "That is where you are wrong, my friend, because I already have a location sorted, and I've got a bit of paper in my pocket to prove it." George had an agreement for some land, which is where Goodison Park sits today, and that is where the story of Goodison Park really begins. Now you may be wondering why Goodison Park is called Goodison Park, and I can tell you. That is because the stretch of road that the stadium is built on one side is called Goodison Road. And the reason that road is called Goodison Road is because it was named after an old engineer called George Goodison. So that old boy, George Goodison, who hasn't been around for a very long time, is the reason for that fantastic, magical stadium being called Goodison Park. Work started to build the stadium, and Goodison Park would become England's first ever purpose-built football stadium with stands on three sides of the pitch. And then, on the 24th of August 1892, it's reported that 12,000 people packed into the stadium. However, it wasn't to watch football. In fact, it was to watch an athletics event and a fireworks display that followed it. The first football match that would be played at Goodison Park was around 133 years ago, and that would be a match between Everton and Bolton Wanderers. Everton, in their salmon and dark blue jerseys, ran out onto the pitch to thousands of cheering and clapping fans, and they beat Bolton 4-2 in an exhibition match. Eventually, of course, competitive football would be played in the stadium, and the first ever competitive goal which was scored at Goodison would be scored by an Everton player called Fred Geary, which got me thinking, I wonder who will be the last ever player to score for Everton in their final game at Goodison Park on May 18th against Southampton this year, the year 2025. It's reported that Everton's first win, or their first competitive win at Goodison Park, was a 6-0 victory against a team which back then were called Newton Heath. These days, you'll know Newton Heath as Manchester United. Over the 133 years of Goodison Park's existence, it's had some ups, and my goodness has it had some downs. The ups have been physical ups, as the stadium has been made to be bigger and safer to host more people. But the downs include World War II, when a street next to the stadium was bombed, and this meant that the stadium was damaged. No matter what has happened at Goodison Park, the fans and supporters have made sure that it's been a special place to watch and enjoy football. And because of that, there have been so many historic moments at the stadium. Like the first ever floodlit game for Everton was a game against no other than their bitter rivals Liverpool, all the way back in 1957, which, as I record this today, was 68 years ago. That means that not only have Goodison Park been hosting night games for 68 years, unlike many other teams, But it also took 65 years before this was possible. So that's 65 years of games which had to be played in daylight. Everton and Goodison have made history on so many occasions over the years. And in 1958, Goodison Park became the first ever football stadium in England to have undersoil heating fitted, which meant if there was snow or frost then it would be melted off and the game could get down to business quickly. Another thing which Everton were the first to do was to install a scoreboard inside the stadium. They were the first English League club in history to display the score inside the stadium, telling the spectators the score and who the goal scorers were. However, not long after this was installed and put into action, Everton beat Southampton 8-0 and the scoreboard ran out of room. They didn't have enough space for the score and the goal scorers. So instead, they had the goal scorers' shirt numbers, and of course, that magnificent 8-0 shining in the stadium. Outside the stadium, there are some statues of historic Everton figures, including the great Dixie Dean, who won the league and the FA Cup with the club, and a player who means so much to the fans even today. I actually met a Dixie Dean a little while ago on one of my live podcast tours visiting a school in Bristol. And remember, if you want a live podcast to happen in your school, then please ask your head teacher to write into the website. Anyway, back to good old Goodison Park. Not only has the stadium been the home of Everton Football Club, but it's also hosted 2 FA Cup finals. It's also hosted lots of international matches. It's also hosted baseball games, rugby games, and one die-hard Everton fan called Tony Bellew also won a world title boxing match in that venue on a glorious sunny May bank holiday weekend back in 2016. What a moment for him and everybody in attendance. Goodison has been responsible for so many memories for so many people over the years, and many matches will stick into the minds of Everton fans. But the Merseyside derby at Goodison will be an extremely special one, especially the last ever Merseyside derby at Goodison, which was held on the 12th of February 2025. And 2-1 down, Everton scored an equaliser in the 98th minute to send their fans absolutely crazy one last time at Goodison in a Merseyside derby. Such an iconic match at Everton Football Club. Goodison Park has been creating memories for Everton fans and football fans in general for 133 years. And on the 18th of May, that will have to come to an end. And the club will move into a new state-of-the-art stadium and a new place where history will start again. It won't just be a sad day on the 18th of May for Everton fans, but for anyone who has experienced the ground for what it is. It's a place full of charm that has witnessed so much over such a long period of time. I hope that you've enjoyed listening and learning about Goodison Park in all of its glory. And remember, if you know someone who loves football just as much as you do, then please tell them about Football for Kids. And whether you're playing football soon, watching it on the telly, or pitchside, I hope that you enjoy the game. See you next time.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.